Face the issues on WBPH and as assistant professor of political science at Northampton Community College. But this evening, it is my distinct privilege to be moderating the candidate forum. I want to emphasize that tonight is a forum and not a debate, and we chose that word deliberately. Debates often shed more heat than light, but in elections, especially like this one, shedding light is integral, not just for our candidates on the stage, but for you, the voter. And so I'm looking forward to a robust conversation this evening on the issues that matter to this school district. My role tonight is that of moderator. We will have two sections of questions. Many of you provide the questions for the second section. I alone have written those questions for the first section, and none of the candidates have seen those questions before tonight. The rules for tonight's forum, the candidates have been informed that they will all have a 2-minute opening. They will have 2 minutes per question, which I will time, but we're going to give them a little bit of leeway. After all, we are here to shed light and not heat, but we'll keep to that time as best we can to keep the conversation moving. Lastly, as per the requirement of the state, we do ask that audience members keep their masks on. The candidates will do the same. And we ask that throughout you would remain quiet out of respect for the candidates, also so we can hear their answers for us. Again, my role tonight is simply that of moderator. I do not live in the Saucon Valley School District, though being here tonight makes me wish I did. So I have no vested political or financial interest in this evening's forum. I'm simply here to moderate and to try to bring out a robust conversation from our candidates so that you, the voters, can go to the polls with the best information possible. So again, we ask that you would remain quiet during the forum out of respect to our candidates, except for right now. Would you join me in welcoming our candidates here tonight? Candidates, good evening. We'll begin with opening remarks, and we'll start just going from my left to my right with Mr. Conte. We'll begin with you, 2 minutes each. Just introduce yourself to the voters. Mr. Conte?
Good evening. My name is John Conte. Is that okay? Is this one working? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so my name is John Conte, and my candidacy for Saucon Valley School Board is centered around two things. Sorry, I can't hear you. You want to move closer to my mouth? Like that? Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably better. Okay, I'll start over. My name is John Conte. My candidacy for the Saucon Valley School Board is centered around two things. First, what is best for the students, and second, what is reasonable and affordable for the taxpayers. These two principles will guide the decisions I will make as a board member if elected to this position. With these principles in mind, there are fundamental values I believe are necessary to guide my thinking. First, students need an education in the classic fundamentals of the 3 R's, namely reading, writing, and arithmetic. These are the building blocks which will serve them throughout their lives. STEM subjects, civics, and history should also be required to give students a well-rounded grounding in modern citizenship. Second, each student's education is a partnership between the school and the parents. Parents must support the school's efforts to ensure that these academic subjects are learned and mastered by their children. And parents are responsible for instilling in their children those personal values they believe in order to become contributing members of the community. The educational curriculum should never include the political agenda of external activist groups such as political parties, advocacy groups, or those with their own agenda. Lastly, the taxpayers must be considered in all funding decisions so as to prevent an undue burden being placed on those who are responsible for paying the bills. Only by adhering to these principles will a proper education be provided to our children, and only in this way will each stakeholder's rights and responsibilities be respected and considered in order to ensure a smooth running system of education.
Good evening. I'm Viviam Demko. Thank you, Dr. Chen, for moderating this event, and Saucon Valley School District for hosting the event. My roots run deep in this community. I can trace my family back 4 generations to my great-great-grandfather, who in 1868 was ordained in New Jerusalem, Apples Church. I have lived my entire life in our Saucon Valley community. I've been married to my husband, Jerry, for 42 years, and we've raised 3 sons in this community. As far as my education, I earned a certificate in early childhood education at Northampton Area Community College. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education from East Stroudsburg University, a master's degree in computers in education from DeSales University, a master's degree in curriculum instruction from Edinburgh University, and I hold an ADA accredited teacher certification in the Orton-Gillingham multisensory method of teaching children to read. I have 28 and a half years of educational experience in Saucon Valley School District, having retired in January of 2021. I've taught 4th grade, 3rd grade, 1st grade, technology, gifted students, and emotional support students. The district tapped my leadership skills when I was transferred to coordinator of academic services and later as a certified literacy coach for teachers. As a school board candidate, I bring a unique, insightful perspective to our school system not found in our current board. Whether you were born here or chose to make this your home, we all want similar things for the children in our community. If I believed our school system was functioning at an acceptable level, I wouldn't be here tonight. There is much work to be done on our toxic school climate, communications, and cuts to our student support services, and a variety of other vital issues. Once addressed, will move our district once again back to its stellar reputation. Although I grew up in a relatively poor financial situation, my childhood home was rich for instilling a sense of responsibility to our community, and I want to continue to use my education and talents to serve our school community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Demko. Mr. Dettmar?
Thank you, Sam, and thank you all for coming tonight. I am Cedric Dettmar. A little background. I have a degree in engineering from MIT, a degree in business from UCLA, and I worked for 2 decades in Silicon Valley for high-tech companies, including Oracle, which is the 2nd largest software company in the world. There I served as a vice president in charge of a $30 million business unit and 100 employees. 4 years ago, when I ran for election to the school board, I had 3 key goals for myself. One was to improve the reputation of Saucon Valley. I think I was really pleased a few months ago when the latest U.S. News Best High School rankings came out and Saucon Valley cracked the top 100 at number 87. Obviously, everybody in the whole district contributed to that, but some of the things that the board did, I believe, also were key in that. My second goal was to improve relations between the teachers and the board. Those of you who have been around the district for some years know that in the past it's been very rocky. I was happy to serve on the negotiating committee for the teacher's contract a couple years ago. We reached an early agreement with the teachers, the first time that's happened in anyone's memory that I spoke to. And it worked for the teachers, and it worked for us, and I believe it works for all of you as taxpayers as well. The third thing that I really wanted to do was to search for ways that we could save money without impacting the experience of our students. I think we did a good job of that. We were able to make upgrades to our facilities. We added a new track. We upgraded this auditorium that you're sitting in right now. I think that those of you who remember the old one know it's a pretty big improvement. And we didn't raise your taxes. We didn't need to raise your taxes because of the savings that we found. The big challenge we had over the last 4 years was COVID, obviously. And I'm really proud that we were one of the few school districts in the entire country that was able to stay open 5 days a week for the entire school year. Our big challenge in the next 4 years is to hire a new superintendent. My experience in business and all the people that I've hired, I believe, will help me to help our district reach a much better decision on who we hire. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Dettmar. Next, Dr. Pakzad.
Yes, hi. My name is Shamim Pakzad. I have 2 kids who go to school here. I have a lot of investment in this district, in the schools. Very interested in making sure that they receive an education that is as best as possible, an experience overall that is a great experience. I have been an educator for the past 30 years. I've taught and tutored elementary, middle, high school math, physics, and science. I have taught at college level calculus, and I've been a professor at Lehigh for the past 13 years. I have taught classes in engineering, and I am now holding academic leadership positions at Lehigh. I'm running based on the record of past 4 years. Mr. Dettmar mentioned some of the achievements that we've had. The fact that the school district has kept the taxes on the taxpayers flat for the past 4 years without cutting services, without cutting any program. Instead, we've actually expanded programs during this time. We've added extracurricular activities that benefit the students is one of the achievements that we've had. Saucon Valley holds its reputation as one of the best school districts in the area. Things that we do are really unique a lot of times. Last year, we were the only school district in Lehigh Valley that had a full in-person experience for more than 80% of our students. There was a series of surveys that the district conducted, and more than 95% of our parents and the community were either satisfied or extremely satisfied with the way that the district handled the issue of COVID. Of course, there's always room for improvement, and those are the places that my experience and the experience of others on the board would help this district move forward. I see my role as representing you, the people in the community, the parents, and most importantly, the kids. That's why I'm here. I have a philosophy that kids first. That's the only thing that for me matters. If there is a conflict of interest between kids and any other group, any other adults, I'm always in favor of the kids and kids' interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Robert Phillips. I'm running for school district director to drive 3 goals: to make Saucon Valley a premier school district and a school of first choice, to be fiscally responsible by incenting students to stay in our district and be able to invest your tax dollars in our schools, and 3, to engage the entire community in supporting and building our schools through respectful dialogue and community pride. It's time to bring public engagement back to board meetings. Discussion between the board and the community should be allowed, not discouraged. The last year has shown that hybrid and virtual and in-person meetings encourage participation. I'll strive to expand opportunities for public participation, not deny it. Faculty participation at board meetings should be welcomed. It's time for collaboration, not division, between board, teachers, parents, community. The reality of the last few years for Saucon Valley schools has been less faculty, less critical support services such as reading specialists, less classroom support such as paraprofessional positions that were both cut in number and reduced to part-time, less options as classes were removed from the high school catalog. The list can go on. You may be told all services have been maintained. It simply isn't true. School choice is here. Instead of giving into it, let's compete. Every student that chooses a cyber or charter option takes funding from your school district to a private enterprise. It's the #1 budget challenge for Pennsylvania's public school systems, and Saucon Valley is no different. Let's keep your investment in Saucon Valley schools here by providing the academic excellence that families are leaving Saucon schools to find. In summary, your vote for me is voting to commit to Saucon being a premier school district, a school of choice. Your vote for me is a vote for fiscal responsibility by incenting students to stay in our district and be able to invest your tax dollars in our schools and not outside of our community, and to engage the entire community in supporting and building our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Thank you, candidates. We'll now begin the first round of questioning. Many of you have already brought up this first topic. Much has been made amidst the COVID-19 pandemic of keeping students, faculty, and staff safe during this pandemic. That debate currently centers on vaccines and masks. As of now, all schools across the Commonwealth are currently under a mask mandate from Pennsylvania's acting Secretary of Health. Though no such mandate exists for vaccines. What steps do you believe the Saucon Valley School Board should take with respect to the COVID-19 vaccine and masking practices? And if that recommendation violates the current statewide mandate, please explain how you would seek redress contra the Commonwealth. Mr. Phillips, we'll begin with you this time.
Thank you. I would not be in favor of violating the state mandate. I am not going to pretend to be smarter than our regional medical experts who have been consulting with the school district. I'm not going to pretend to outguess CDC and other professional organizations on what their guidance would be. As far as vaccine mandates, that is a discussion that should be ongoing with our staff. It does need to be a discussion since most of our staff is union represented. And many organizations, including the one that I work for, have very successfully negotiated vaccine agreements. I have no doubt that that can happen here. As for student vaccines, for half of our population, it's a theoretical question because they don't have an option today. For many vaccines that do exist today, there are state and federal guidelines, and I'm sure that the same will follow. And when those do come, I would expect the school district will adopt those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Dr. Pakzad?
Well, the policy that the district currently has is optional masking, which basically gives the choice here to the parents. What the school basically did before the start of the school year was in response to the rising numbers of COVID, we added a tiered approach that would take into account the actual number of cases in our community. At the beginning of the year, we didn't have any numbers from our school, so we relied on the numbers in the county with the goal of going back and looking what is happening actually in our community. This idea of one size fits all, I don't think it's ever a good idea. And the fact that the CDC's mandate basically said that there is no difference between the school that is in a hotbed of the pandemic and a school that is somewhere in Nebraska without any incident of COVID, this clearly is not a well thought through advice. And this is not something that I say, this is something that a lot of the health professionals also said. So what happened, obviously, as everyone knows, is that the government mandate came before the first or second week of the school, so that question has become a moot point. But I think at some point we have to take a look at it. And I just want to bring up to the attention of everyone the fact that the mask question is not a question where On one side, we have only benefits, and on the other side, we have none. We have 350 kids in our district who have special needs. We have 50 kids who are on different parts of the autism spectrum. We have about 100 kids in this district who receive speech or language services. All of these kids, or a lot of them, are by default living in situations where they have a lot of communication problems, and masking them would just make that problem worse. So this is a real cost to this policy. Now, I'm not advocating for taking the mask off tomorrow. Clearly, we are under the government mandate, and we have a high incident of COVID in the county. In the district, fortunately, we haven't had to deal with that. So I think a very balanced approach that takes into account the health, science on one side, and the interest of the students here, this community, and the realities that we are living under on the other side, that's the balanced approach that I'm approaching. I advocated for having a balanced approach at the beginning of the year. We went by the best science that was available last year, which was the CDC's requirement, suggestions for masking and distancing and hygiene, and I'm advocating for that. That's what I do for a living. But we can't really lose sight of the cost of these policies on our students.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. Mr. Dettmar?
Thank you. My number one consideration in the actions that we should take for both masks and for vaccinations is keeping the schools open and keeping our kids in class and not at home in quarantine. And the only way we can do that is if people feel safe. As Dr. Pakzad described, the approach we took before the governor's mandate, which was to ask teachers and students whether they wanted to be in a mask-only environment or they were fine with an optional environment. And we had a plan that he described that would allow that to happen. The COVID cases did kick up, and a governor's mandate did kick in. I'm hopeful that at some point in the future that his mandate will be relaxed and we can go back to making our own plans. One of the things that I've seen is that we've had pretty few COVID cases in our school recently, and also I've looked at the statistics for our county, and almost 90% of the people in Northampton County have at least one vaccination. So I think that we are well on our way to not needing to wear masks, but once the governor's mandate expires, we will revisit our plan and do our best to give people the options that they prefer while keeping everyone safe. The same thing really applies to vaccinations. I think that there's a very good chance that we won't need to have or even consider mandatory vaccinations. I think that, as Dr. Pakzad described, there are a lot of costs with these policies. But one of the biggest ones is that we have a lot of people in our community that are just very opposed to these things. And it's important that our whole community support our school. If we start making the school focused on one part of our community at the expense of another, it's very destructive for our whole community and as well as the people that work here. So I, again, will take an approach that keeps the school open, keeps our kids safe, but gives people all the options that we possibly can. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dettmar. Ms. Demko.
My first priority would be keeping our school staff and students safe. That's it. That's what, as a school board director, you're responsible for making decisions for the entire school community. You're not just making a personal decision for yourself. You are responsible for what happens after you make those decisions. I would have to rely on experts, medical experts. I am not one. I don't pretend to be, nor would I ever purport to be. The CDC and the state of Pennsylvania set guidelines. I would follow those guidelines. I wouldn't alter from those guidelines. That's the advice we would get from the medical professionals, and that's what I would follow. that would offer our school and our staff and our students the best protection. I researched the mandating a vaccine, and I would understand it to be very controversial. I know there are teachers opposed to vaccines. I understand that. According to PSEA's site, about 85 to 90% of teachers already have the vaccine. I would have to consider it in order to keep our students safe. We have students who can't get a vaccine. We have students who are in danger. As I was walking into CVS the other night, I was, thinking, okay, I've had COVID, I've been vaccinated, I have both shots, I'm waiting for this evening to be over to get my third shot. And I thought, okay, I'm okay without a mask, and a young child walked out of CVS, which prompted me to put on my mask, because there are other people that are in there who maybe can't get a vaccine or who are too young to get a vaccine at this point. I would pursue it by working with our representatives of our staff and to implement an effective plan for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Demko. Mr. Conte?
Thanks. I'm against the vaccine mandate. I don't think they're necessary, and I think they're an intrusion on personal rights.
Can we ask for silence from the audience, please? Thank you.
There are lots of treatments available for those people that are infected with. All those treatments should be respected. I think the school, by necessity, has to file a Pennsylvania Department of Health mandate. But I agree with the current board members that a mask optional policy is the way to go. I think parents should be allowed to decide for themselves whether their students, their children should be required to wear a mask. If they think it's necessary, fine, they can send the child to school with a mask. If they don't think it's necessary, then they shouldn't have to. The school is obviously incumbent upon the school to make sure that all the school's facilities are sanitary and clean, and that as much safety as possible for those people who may be ill to be able to prevent the spread of germs. But I think this is a decision that's ultimately left to the parents with school guidance, and this policy needs to be revisited once the Department of Health's mandate ends. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Conte. Our second question continues with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Saucon Valley School District, as has been mentioned, is ranked in the nation's top 100 and has continuously boasted one of the lowest dropout rates in the Commonwealth. That said, one major concern coming out of the current pandemic is the notion of a learning regression. For years prior to the pandemic, employers and professors alike have stated that students are leaving high school more ill-prepared for the real world. The pandemic has only deepened this gap despite the heroic efforts that we've all seen our faculty and staff make throughout the past year and a half. As we all know, platitudes are not policies. What does this district need to do to support both their students and their faculty and staff in coming back from the, quote, lost year of instruction and best prepare them for their respective futures? For this, we'll begin right in the middle with Mr. Dettmar.
Thank you. I think that our policy last year of keeping our kids in person 5 days a week, about 80%, a little less at the beginning and quite a bit more at the end of the year, really helped our students a lot to avoid what nationally is a real problem of kids not learning nearly as much as they should have during the year of COVID. We've actually had the principals address the board and tell us about the problems that we have, and especially the kids that learned from home, there are problems for those kids. But the kids who learned from school, according to our principals, are doing quite well. And For those that are struggling, we've actually just spoke the other day with our acting superintendent, and we're going to be adding additional reading specialists to help those kids get back on track. And we're very open, at least I certainly am, to making changes to get our kids back on track. That's our responsibility to do that. I think that we're very lucky that that task is not enormous like it is in most other school districts around the country because of our actions last year. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dettmar. Dr. Pakzad.
Well, there is about 20% of ESSER funds. This is a grant that the federal government dedicated for the schools to combat the impact of COVID is earmarked for learning loss. In our district, it amounts to about $400,000. Every penny of that money obviously is going to be spent to address any issues that may be there. Obviously, amongst all of the districts in this area, because of the fact that we had in-person learning for most of our students, the learning loss is very, very small. In May, the principal of the elementary school had a presentation and looked at all of the data from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and the conclusion was that we are really not seeing much of learning loss in our elementary school, which was very, very encouraging, obviously, and that's what we were all hoping for. Now, that doesn't mean that we would be lax. We are going to spend as much resources, as much efforts to make sure that the kids are back on track if there is any gaps in their education. Of course, summer slump is, as many teachers know, one of the biggest factors that basically contributes to kids regressing, and that's something that we are going to address now. I'm going to say one more thing, and that's about the kids with special needs. These are the kids that had the highest level of learning loss last year because of the loss of services that happened as a result of the practices that we were implementing. And these are the kids that are the most vulnerable amongst us, and these are the kids that I'm the most worried about, and I really want to make sure that this district does not forget them. This district spends as much as needed in terms of the resources and efforts and staff to address the problems that they have faced during the last year. This includes learning loss. This includes regression in terms of the behavior, in terms of speech, in terms of all sorts of deficiencies that these kids had, and they really rely on this. This is any parent of a child with special needs knows that it takes a lot of work to move them an inch forward, and then you have the loss of those services, and that causes regression that is really, in a lot of cases, requires a lot of work for us to get back to where we were.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. Mr. Phillips?
So we certainly did well last year with the roughly 80% of our community that came to school in person. And the anecdotal evidence that I've heard suggests that some of the online learners had some of the greatest regression. That was a win, and I think that credit really goes to the administration and the faculty that made it work. At the same time, there were concerns that were raised, such as very large class sizes, that were brought up, but a solution was never publicly shared. I can only presume, since somebody didn't take a victory lap for reducing class sizes, that it didn't happen. We had an opportunity over the summer to take Saucon Valley Summer School, which historically has been a family-paid penalty for their child failing the class, and allowing those students to attend for free. The board did vote that people could get a refund if their child successfully passed the class. I think we would have been much better served taking that opportunity to encourage those children who felt that they needed some more instruction or who did not do well in final assessments to make it easier and free from the beginning to take that opportunity. There's a need to focus on remediation. I suspect we may need more after-school options for those students that need more help getting up to speed in their current year's classes for what was not covered last year, or that they might need some more refresher on. And lastly, we need to make sure that we are adequately staffed. We've already had days in the high school this year where multiple classes have been moved into this very room and told, you can work on your homework, but we don't have enough teachers to cover the classes. So we're missing instructional days because we're understaffed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Conte.
Probably the best thing that I can say about that off the top of my head, because I haven't studied this in detail, is there's been a lot of federal legislation passed in the last year to address COVID. So because I'm not intimately familiar with the budget and the budgeting process yet, I can't speak to specifics, but I understand that there's literally millions and millions of dollars going to the schools to be able to address the lost year of learning that we experienced during COVID. So to me, the funds are available and should be put to good use. How those funds are put to good use is the $64,000 question. I know from personal experience that the schools have lots of learning support systems, instructional assistance, special programs, after school activities, after school assistance and whatnot. So all of those should be put to good use in order to make up for the lost year of learning. There is always a summer slump, and that has been exaggerated, I think, as a result of the COVID problem. But I think overall the students will be able to make up those lost learning opportunities through the programs that exist in the school and which can be augmented with federal funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conte. Ms. Demko?
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Pakzad, and loss of services causes regression. We were open last year, and we're one of the only schools to be open. I understand that. The cost, in my opinion, was pretty heavy to do that. We took our reading specialists and put them into classrooms to lower the class size necessary. So the student supports weren't there. My understanding is that the reading specialists looking to be hired or to replace those we lost to being moved into different positions after we've trained them extensively in reading support, being moved into different positions and thus creating the need. I applaud the district in moving forward in replacing those reading specialists and hiring highly qualified reading specialists for our students. There is summer slump, that's not a question. Over the summer, there was offered to the high school and I believe the middle school supports, yet none for the elementary school. We have students learning to read. If we're going to maintain our graduation rate of all our students, we need to do that. We've had students, and the class size, you know, I witnessed it firsthand as I was assigned to a remote class of fourth graders, and I had 32 students, ranging from students who needed gifted support to severely autistic students. That's a range. I'm very experienced as a teacher that I couldn't meet. I was teaching 32 students remotely while people down the hallway were experienced about 15 to 20 students in the classroom. We have 20% of our population who, I wouldn't say everyone, excuse me, let me rephrase that. We have a large part of that 20% that are struggling. I know it, I'm working with some of those students. I have students who in fourth grade only made it halfway through the math curriculum. Now what are you doing in fifth grade when your students who were in the building proceeded as they should have, and then you have 20% who only got half of the curriculum? What compounding that factor is unbelievable. The part that I didn't hear anyone address, that the question was asked, was on the faculty and staff as well. They're exhausted. Many of them actually are out of sick days because of their family needs, their own needs with COVID, and we're trying to deal with that issue for the staff and faculty. We need to keep their mental health in mind and proceed to address those concerns for the faculty and staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Demko. The next question, many of you have brought up in answering this past one. One of the challenges that confronts every school board is the annual budget. This has only been exacerbated due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and is not something unique to Saucon Valley School District. Coming off the pandemic, layoffs, full-time to part-time adjustments, and other cuts have been proposed. How do you balance the budget for the district? And please be specific. If you're calling for a raise in taxes, indicate by how much. If you're proposing cuts, indicate how much and where. We'll begin with Mr. Conte.
At the risk of repeating myself, I would first look to the federal aid that's been available, made available over the last year, and exhaust all of the funds that are available in order to make up for the budget shortfalls and for the problems that occurred during the COVID period. That's at the federal level. Secondarily, there's state funds as well. And I know that there are state programs as well where funding has been made available for school budgets. So that would be a second source that should be looked at and exhausted. And then thirdly, unfortunately, are always tax increases, which would be a last resort. Again, I can't speak intimately to the budget numbers. That would have to be reviewed based on budgeting needs and where the shortfall fell in specific. But if increases in local real estate taxes were necessary, that would be the ultimate, but I would say the last resort for purposes of meeting those budget needs.
Thank you, Mr. Conte. Ms. Demko?
I probably agree with something Dr. Pakzad said, that we need to spend as much as we need to remediate some of these students. We couldn't control COVID, but indeed, as Mr. Conte said, we got a lot of money from the government to help remediate students and work with that. We have a phenomenal business manager. I worked with him on contracts and different issues. And his foresight into maintaining our budget and maintaining our reserves and working to really fund this school adequately through everything is impressive. Raise in taxes. The current school board raised taxes in the first year they had the opportunity to do so in their thing by not a whole lot, but some. And I've experienced, as you know, I've been in this community my entire life. I've experienced the kick the can down the road. And that's what I see happening here, where we keep kicking the can down the road. We're not going to raise taxes, we're not going to raise taxes, we're not going to raise taxes. I'm not saying I'm raising taxes. Indeed, the budget would have to be examined to see what we could do to manage within what we currently have. There are a lot of needs out there. We maintain excellent facilities, and that's costly as well. And we maintain supports for our students. We have to maintain them. That's why we're all here. They are top on the priority list. So raise taxes, I would not have the information to say yes, yes, move forward. But I don't want to repeat a history. If you look back, and this current board will tell you about, oh, we had tax increases of 10%, 10%, 10%, but look before that to where it was no tax increase, no tax increase, no tax increase, no tax increase. Eventually, that catches up with you. We have been, the one thing that Saucon Valley has experienced, and I understand lots of schools have experienced, is lowering enrollment. So that has allowed us to survive under our current budget without tax increases. Our enrollment did go down, and thus we had teachers that we could move into different positions, et cetera. Again, I'm not sure where you would cut anything. As a community member, I raised a lot of money. I'm sorry, Dr. Chen, did this buzzer go off? I didn't, no? Yes.
Right there.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe I heard it. I've raised a lot of money and supplies. I know the budget's been cut from teachers to get the very basic supplies they need. A community group raised over $1,300 for our students. We need to take a close look at this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dettmar?
Thanks. We're pretty fortunate with our community here that during the time of COVID, our economy recovered very rapidly, and our tax base returned to normal very rapidly. And in addition, with that and the money that we received from the federal government, which was $3 million, which is a big chunk of a $50 million budget, we're in quite good shape with our budget. I am familiar with the budget, and I can tell you that given how much money we have and the needs that we have, that I think we don't need to consider any cuts or increasing taxes in the near future. The one risk we have is that inflation seems to be kicking up, and that may put some extra pressure on our ability if we have to pay our folks a lot more than our forecasts show right now. That could be trouble for all of us taxpayers. But I also commit to not cutting the experience for our kids, and if our administration tells us that we need more reading specialists in the elementary school or anywhere else, we will do that. But as Ms. Demko described, our student population has been shrinking, and we have not just replaced teachers that have left, because that was the easiest thing to do. We have pushed the administration to work hard to right size so that our class sizes for our lower grades typically are between 20 and 25, which I think most folks agree is a pretty good number. Now, for the special ed folks, I'm perfectly fine to do what the administration tells us we need to do to take care of those kids and meet their needs. But right now, based on what we have so far with our forecast and our budget and the funding received from the government, no tax increases, I believe, are necessary, and no cuts are necessary either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dettmar. Dr. Pakzad?
Yeah, so we are very fortunate. We are a well-resourced district, a highly taxed district, and that means that we have a lot of money to do what we need to do. There is a funding gap in education. Everybody talks about it. You've heard it in the news. What that means is that there are rich districts like us. We spend more than $22,000 per student, almost the highest, if not the highest number in Lehigh Valley. And then we have a district like Allentown that spends only $11,000. So that's the gap. That gap is not going to be removed by us raising taxes and spending more. We have, fortunately, a lot of resources, and I think the issue of resources for this district is the last thing that we need to be worried about. As Ms. Demko said, we have a great business manager, administration, who is very careful about this. We're looking at annual forecast, at 5-year forecast, and these numbers have converged in the past 4 years. We started by this sort of like cry of doom and gloom about the budget, and look at us. 4 years later, we have a balanced budget, and we have a budget that is really working for our needs, for our community. I'm in favor of a smart allocation of resources. 2.5 years ago, we had a bid for lighting system in the high school. The contractor, the consultant, had made a mistake. They sold it based on an engineering error. It was a $300,000 expense on this district, and I'm sorry to say I was the one in the 1 to 8 votes that lost that vote. But then I went back and I looked at the numbers, and I showed it, shared it with the rest of my board members, And 2 weeks later, the consultant came to the board meeting. They apologized for the error. They admitted that it was an error. And we rescinded that portion of the contract, and that saved the taxpayers here in this district $300,000. So this is an example, just an example of how a board member can be effective using the expertise that they have to save money for the taxpayers. And that's part of what you need to do for a functioning district. I'll say one more thing. We have residents in this district, many residents in this district that are bleeding. These are people who are on fixed income, old senior citizens, and to just come there and say, hey, you know what, let's raise their taxes by this amount. A lot of them, they have to choose between medicine and their taxes, food and their taxes. Raising taxes on these people is not the wise way to go. It's not the compassionate ways to go. We have to consider all of the members of our community. Tax increase is not a no-no for nobody. Everybody knows that we have to pay the bills, but that shouldn't come at the cost of the residents that can't afford it, and that shouldn't be something that we consider likely.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. So as been noted, we have been fortunate that our income stream was not terribly impacted by the pandemic, and thanks to federal money, has increased. I presented to the board in June of 2020 when there were significant cuts proposed for the coming year because there was great fear about tax dollars decreasing. The income decrease never came through, but the cuts did. So our income is up. We don't get reports on what is actually spent out of the budget, so we know what the budget is. We don't know how much has actually been expended. As I mentioned earlier, I think we have a real opportunity to start converting the large expense and growing expense for cyber and charter schools by enticing, encouraging, bringing those students back by meeting their needs here. When I started following the school board more than 10 years ago, perhaps 12, our goal for elementary school classes was less than 20. We typically average 16 to 18. It's just been reported those numbers are now 20 to 25. When I started following the school board, we had robust discussions among the administration, the board, and the community about what the budget proposal was. There was proposals brought forward to replace, augment, remove teachers, and the pros and cons were talked about. What I've seen the past couple of years at board meetings, that discussion is not public. The public directive to the superintendent has been, fit your spending plan to the existing tax dollars. Now, maybe that's the right approach, but we are missing the opportunity to discuss what we're foregoing to keep that norm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. At this point, we will move to questions from the audience. I have a stack in front of me. We will not get to all of them, but many of them are asking the same. And one question that has been asked multiple times, perhaps asked by most of our audience members, is also one that has made it to my list. As you can imagine, it deals with critical race theory. It is a hot-button topic on school board agendas throughout the country. Critical race theory specifically, but also more broadly, how we deal with race relations. To define the terms, critical race theory is an academic concept that hypothesizes race as a social construct rather than the result of individual bias or prejudice. It therefore finds racism as a core principle embedded into legal, political, and societal systems. It is a theory that is debated by scholars, as most academic theories are. As of now, Saucon Valley School District does not teach critical race theory in its curricula. What is your position on the employment of critical race theory in primary or secondary education curricula? And more broadly, how ought the district address questions of racial prejudice and inequality? For this, we'll begin on the end with Mr. Phillips.
So you're correct. Critical race theory is not taught at Saucon today. It's a political football. It's not a reality as far as it impacts our schools today. The larger question is, what are we teaching? Are we educating our children to identify their bias? Are we teaching them to identify where inequality exists? This school district was featured on a national show a couple of years ago because of race-related problems within the district. So the issue needs to be discussed, and we need to be teaching our children appropriately as their maturity allows to identify what shapes their thinking and their views. Now, when I went to school, I was taught the Indians were ecstatic when the Europeans showed up and took over the country. We're now starting to find out maybe they weren't quite so thrilled to see the European settlers come and take their land. So there's always an opportunity to be improving. We had a course on gender studies that was developed by one of our teachers at the high school. It's been removed from the course catalog because we had some board members who felt that that was an inappropriate subject to be taught. I think our high school students are capable of understanding that. So I trust our administration, I trust our department leaders to be putting together age-appropriate, non-political curriculum and delivering it to our students in a fair and balanced manner.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Dr. Pakzad?
Well, as you mentioned, CRT is not part of our curriculum. We have a process, we have a policy that determines what gets into the curriculum, what books are included in the classroom, and which ones are not. This policy is very transparent. Anything that gets into the classroom has to come to a public board meeting. The public will have an opportunity to express their opinion, to chime in, and the result is transparent and public. And I think that's the best remedy for the problems that people have with the curricular issues. The transparency and the sunshine that is in that regard. I'm a big proponent of that, and I think that should be done for all topics, and I think that's something that really protects the community and the community standard. As you can say, you know, I just need to open my mouth for you to know that I wasn't born in this country. I immigrated here 23 years ago, almost to the date. October 14th is the 23rd anniversary of my immigration to the US. In this country, I got every opportunity that I couldn't have got anywhere else in the world. I got the best education at the best public university in the world. I was offered a job as one of the best at one of the best universities in this country, and I had hundreds, thousands of our fellow citizens in this community go to the polling booths, and they punched my name to send me here as a representative. So this community, this country is not a racist country. I really believe in American exceptionalism. A theory that looks at people, in a way that brings them down and assumes that they are racist is a wrong theory in my mind. I think we should give the benefit of the doubt to the people based on their actions, based on how they, the beliefs that they espouse. This doesn't mean that the racism does not exist. I encounter racism every day, but I refuse to generalize it, and I refuse to label people based on their race, and I think that's an important issue. A theory can be a theory. I don't need to be an expert in a theory to know that if the results of a theory are false, there is something wrong with the theory. If I drop an apple and someone says this apple will go up, I don't need to know a lot of math and physics to know that there is something wrong in that theory. A theory that says Martin Luther King Jr. is racist is not the right theory, is not a good theory, right? That does not belong to the grade school. We don't have to teach our kids at 4th grade the concept of race through that lens. Now, we have to have race as part of our education. It's an important topic. It's an ailment of the society, and that's a fact. But that shouldn't be done based on accusation, based on an approach that basically puts a lot of the people, a lot of the families, a lot of our fellow citizens in a defensive situation. I'll say one last thing. Racial education should promote racial unity, should not promote racial division. A race discussion that has already divided this country cannot be the right race discussion for our public schools.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. Mr. Dettmar?
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Pakzad that the best approach for us to take with what we teach to our kids is the sunshine approach. Our books and our approaches should be debated in public, and everyone can see what it is and where we're going. As far as the specifics of CRT, from my understanding, it's pretty clear that it's about making significant changes to how we govern ourselves and how our economic system works. And that's, to me, clearly a political discussion. And we work very hard to keep politics out of our school. There obviously needs to be discussion of some politics in political classes, but when there's pretty strong disagreement in our community about how we should approach some problem, having the school teach one particular approach as the right way just doesn't make sense for our community as a whole. Now, when it comes to racism, I have no tolerance for it. I do know that it exists in our society. We have a bullying policy that covers racial bullying, and I can't say that it works perfectly. I know that it doesn't, but we have that policy, and we are doing our best to enforce that so that when anyone is subject to overt racism, that comes to a stop. Obviously, there is always going to be all those little death by 1,000 cuts problems, but we cannot be bringing political solutions to societal problems into our school, especially pushing one side versus the other. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dettmar. Ms. Demko?
Racism exists in our community. We can stop going here to our society. As I went out and met different people in my community, and people of different races, that's what I heard. My child feels uncomfortable in the school. My child was called the N-word, and it was acceptable in the classroom. We've had professional development for teachers on racism, and those small little cuts that add up to major things. I sat as the union president in this very auditorium and listened when they had a forum on racism, and listened to a student say what happened to him in 1st grade and how it just built on that 1st grade. And it built and it built and it built in him. There is no child who should be in our school system that feels like that. None, no one, no matter what, no matter what. And indeed, we need to follow the process for the curriculum. It's my understanding that a teacher requested from the Saucon Valley Foundation for Educational Innovation to do the global read aloud. These books are selected and read by educators in the entire world. And there's a lot of talk and back and forth on these topics. And the book was stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. My understanding is our board decided, after they approved this, to pull it back. They didn't allow the book to be used. It is Indigenous Peoples Day. I understand, I have a brother-in-law and a niece who are Native American. I've been to the reservation. I've heard the racism that they are dealing with. This is our community. I've heard it in our community. I've been appalled by it in our community. And I'll just say, we need professional development for our staff, and we need to start educating our students to be accepting of all people, no matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Demko. Mr. Conte?
I do not believe in critical race theory. I think it is a political agenda. It's being forced throughout this country, not just in the schools, in multiple levels. And I would do everything I could to keep it out of the school. Fortunately, it's not in this school, which is a blessing. Does racism exist? Yes, Ms. Demko, it absolutely exists. And will racism be eradicated? In my opinion, not in my lifetime, nor in my children's lifetime. Racism is a fact of life. Reverse racism exists. I've been the subject of reverse racism. So I completely agree with you, Mrs. Demko. Racism is not a good thing, and we should do everything we can in order to prevent it. And that comes from teaching our children proper values and policing them and policing our curriculum so that it is race neutral. I don't believe America is a racist country, and I think a perfect example of that is Obama would never have been elected if this country was racist. So, in my opinion, these are personal values that need to be practiced both in the school and outside of the school. And just like any other form of discrimination, they need to be brought to people's attention, but they cannot be a part of the formal curriculum of and imposing certain values on the students here when that's best left to the family to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conte. Oh, just a friendly reminder to please hold your applause. We will have a chance to applaud everyone at the end, but this will help us keep this forum going. So our next question, and we'll start here with Dr. Pakzad this time. This question came up several times in several different ways, and it's asking about the involvement of the entire community in the school board. How would you ensure that parents and their opinions are better represented during school board meetings? And another question along similar lines, how would you work to include the community, including those who may not have children attending these schools anymore, and ensure that their opinions are heard and better represented among the board, especially when making decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, one of the advantages of what we are doing now as candidates is that we are going door to door. We're talking to a lot of members of the community. This is an opportunity that we don't have at a normal time, and I really wish that there was a little more engagement and involvement by the community in the school matters. One of my friends, you know, a couple of years ago brought up the issue of public relations, right? Having publications that are prepared by the school and are shared with not just the parents, but by the whole community to let them know about what's going on at the school. And I think that was a great idea. I tried to pursue it. We didn't get really too far during the COVID year to achieve that. But I think that's a cornerstone of trust in the community for what's happening at the school. There are functions for different meetings and events that are happening. Just like the audience is not allowed to come here now and participate in this forum that we have, the board meeting is also a business meeting for the school board. The school in the past 4 years under the previous superintendent had community events that were happening at the beginning a lot more frequently than at a later time. And the reason for that was because the participation by the public, including by the parents, was dwindling. There weren't a lot of people who were interested in coming to these community events. So I'm absolutely, completely supportive of those opportunities. Those are places that you can actually engage. You can have conversations that go beyond a soundbite and a 2-minute something that you say, and it's probably not going to have a lasting impact. And I think we should do a lot more of it. I came here to this board because I learned about the issues by my involvement, and I think this is something that should be done by a lot of our fellow citizens. I'm committed to do as much as I can to make that a reality.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. We'll go to Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. So as I mentioned in my opening statement, one of the things that we proved during the last year is that online meetings, while not ideal, work. Hybrid meetings, allowing people to participate remotely to an in-person meeting, works. I can't come up with a good reason why we can't be doing that for our school board meetings. We have community members that have expressed an interest in being able to participate remotely. Hellertown does it for their council meetings. Lower Saucon does it. I'm sure they'd be happy to share their technology and expertise with us. We need to welcome discussion, alternative opinions. I understand it's pleasant to live inside an echo chamber of opinions that are all like your own, but that's not where we have the true opportunity for growth and diversity of values. What I felt, and what I've heard from others, is participating in a school board meeting as a community member often feels downright disrespectful. Questions are no longer answered by the board. Oftentimes, you can see the board members texting, eye rolls. We're not inviting people in. We've created a structure of subcommittees. Maybe this has provided some efficiency for the board, but it makes it that much more difficult for the community to participate. And the meeting notes that come out of the subcommittee meetings are generally a couple of sentences. They don't carry the essence of what's going on. We've got the facilities at least to record the board meetings, but we don't take advantage of it for the subcommittees. We need to show the same respect for the community that the board shows to each other. There was a requirement in place last year that if you wanted to speak during a board meeting, you had to turn on your camera. Fine. If you're going to require it of the community, it should have been required for every board member to show that same courtesy back to the community. Board members, administration are invited to participate remotely today. We need to show that same respect to the community. And that, my friend, is how you bring inclusion and community back into participating with the schools.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Conte.
I think that all of these points that have just been raised are all valid points. I've been attending school board meetings for the last 3 or 4 months. I don't find them non-inclusive. I find that they follow a schedule and agenda, which I believe is necessary in order to maintain order, in order to get the things done that need to be done. I don't find the board members to be offensive or disrespectful, And whenever there's been an open comment period, they've been more than willing to listen to whoever has attended and who wants to make a point. So I think that obviously is a primary way that community members can voice their concerns with the board, and I think that should continue. I know that the school administrators do surveys with the parents of the students. That might be another way for more open communication to occur with the community at large. I do agree that Zoom meetings, online meetings, are an effective way to be able to have people observe what's going on and submit questions according to agenda. And I would agree with all those things as being necessary in order to promote communication from school board to community and vice versa. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Conte. Ms. Demko?
I'd just like to say we always have the opportunity to knock on doors, and I have found it to be really important. It was one of the things that doing and experiencing this, I just mentioned to someone the other day, I think everyone should run for an office, for a position, and go out and knock on your neighbors' doors. It was really powerful to meet some of my new neighbors. I wasn't in my area where I live. To meet some people who had moved into town, to hold discussions with them, to talk about topics, talk about life in general in Saucon Valley School District. So I think that would be a very powerful way. Yeah, the rate of people who answer the door is rather low, but those who did, I had an opportunity to speak with them and really address some of their issues and concerns and talk about and hear their child's experience in our schools and what was missing, what they wanted to see. It was really powerful for me. In the past, we have shared additionally with the community. When the school was built, I distinctly remember groups of community members, mostly older community members, coming in to see the new school. They've invested in it. They had the right to see it, to see what was going on. And it was really interesting. One of the fountains was, in the hand washing thing, was made to save water. And the one person comments, he goes, "Oh, look at that, it's still running and your hands are clean." So he's very concerned about that. And we have done some of that in the recent past where when we put on the shows, the community is invited. I agree that when we went away from the Zoom, it was limiting to people being able to attend school board meetings. We have parents and other community members who can't come to a school board meetings because of their home situation. And they had the opportunity to attend. And I'm going to be quite honest with you, I've attended more Hellertown Council meetings than ever because they're on Zoom. And they've noticed the increase in attendance. Effective boards engage the community they serve, and we need to engage our community. They have voted the people into office, and we have a responsibility to serve every one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Dettmar?
Thanks. I certainly agree with some of the comments that Dr. Pakzad made earlier that we should do a better job of communicating our activities to all of you. Even if you look at the minutes of our school board meetings, it's very difficult to kind of trace the path. Things pop up one meeting and then they don't show up for a few meetings. And it can be hard to understand what the real progress of things is. And I think that we could do a better job of describing specific initiatives and their progress as they move through our kind of contorted process that we're required to follow. I too really appreciated going out and knocking on doors, and I know I will continue. Maybe I'll knock on some of your doors too. And that is a great way to find out what people really care about. It's very difficult to simulate that kind of exchange in a school board meeting. It's just not practical to have a Q&A when there are lots of people who wish to speak. we do sometimes entertain a little bit of Q&A when the meeting is, when there are only a few people there, because it's practical to do that. Going forward, I have heard from a lot of people that really do miss the Zoom calls, and you know, I think it might be worth reconsidering that in the future. But it's really, I think that the kind of community meetings that we had, even though they're not that well attended, I think it is an opportunity for people to come to the school and to talk to our administrators and to really exchange what their issues are and their ideas, and for that feedback to come back to us. Thanks.
Thank you. We are now moving to a final question, and then we will have closing statements before we wrap up tonight. Several people have asked this question. Obviously, COVID-19 has taught us that we cannot always predict what will come before the board, but the few things that will come before this next board, including budgets, as well as the union contract. And as with every board, there are questions of contracts, vendors, and so forth. Since serving on school board is not a full-time responsibility, all of you have other interests, other jobs, and potentially conflicts of interest. How will you address those conflicts of interest? Will you recuse yourself should they come up? And if not, how would you address that? And for this, we'll start with Ms. Demko, and then we'll move our way around.
Thank you. It's not a surprise to anyone that I've worked on many agreements with and for the teachers and with the school board. That's not surprising to anyone in this room, I'm sure. It is an agreement. I want to make that clear. It's not a contract. It's an agreement. Both sides come to an agreement. I've worked on many different contracts, not always in the head negotiator position. And I do remember back to early birds, and I remember back to the district working together. Administration, the board, and the teachers working together to assure an agreement that everyone could move forward with. I have a comprehensive understanding of our teacher agreement and its history. We have made many changes to the contract that have saved many dollars. There are negotiating an agreement is not an easy thing. To be able to manage an agreement, you have to fully understand what the other side is feeling and understanding what they want. Oftentimes, as a negotiator, my own team would say to me, "Why are you always on the board's side?" I said, "I'm not on the board's side. There are no sides, first of all. We're working together on an agreement. And second, if I don't understand what the school and the community needs, then I won't come to an agreement. We won't be able to reach an agreement. We're working together on this. Should never be an adversarial environment. We are working together for our students. And it takes both parties. There is not one party responsible when things don't go right. There are contracts that were settled for $5 million more than they should have been because the board didn't move forward when they were offered a settlement with the teachers. $5 million it cost. Because I threw up my hands. I said, I'm agreeing to your proposal in all but one area, and you didn't accept it. We went to a mediator, and the mediator awarded additional money. We need to work together and stop this adversarial feeling in this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Conte?
If there was any conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest, I would certainly recuse myself from the negotiations. My background is insurance IT, so as far as that's concerned, school contract negotiations are new to me, and therefore there wouldn't be an issue as far as I was concerned personally. I do think that all members of the board have to take an objective viewpoint towards the contract negotiations. The bottom line is, again, what is in the best interest of the students and what is in the interest of the taxpayers who have to fund the system. Any conflict of interest where someone can benefit from the negotiations that are ensuing for the contract need to be handled objectively, and those people who may stand to benefit from those negotiations, in my opinion, should recuse themselves just as a matter of good faith bargaining. So that's pretty much the way that I would handle it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Conte. We'll go over here, Mr. Phillips.
So to jump back to a previous topic for one quick soundbite when we spoke about senior citizens who may be house rich and cash poor, it's always worth pointing out that this district does offer a tax rebate to those members of our community, and hopefully they all know it, but it's worth mentioning at every opportunity in case there's somebody out there who doesn't. This district does offer a tax rebate to qualified senior citizens. Now, you've asked about two current topics, conflicts of interest and contracts. I certainly, as I suspect all of us do, support disclosing any conflict of interest, and I would expect people to take it seriously and ensure even the appearance of a conflict of interest is disclosed. We have board members who used to regularly recuse themselves from any votes with a particular charter school because they had attachments to it. We don't hear those anymore. So it's something that we all need to be conscious of. As far as contract issues go, I believe that we have a real morale issue among our staff. I think we have stress issues among our staff. I think we have workload expectations, and perhaps we're not offering them the work-life balance that we should. Those are issues that are going to have to be addressed. If I'm right, we're not going to get their best work if they're not bringing their best selves to work every day. Contract negotiations, everything that Mrs. Demko said comes down to one word for me. It's respect. Mutual respect for our faculty and our staff, respect for the community, and I believe that our faculty and staff shows great respect back to the administration and the school board. People deserve to be paid fairly for the work they do and the skills that they bring to the table. Not too long ago, somebody suggested that it was improper that we had teachers who were earning more than the median income of our community. Doesn't make sense to me. Teachers need to be paid fairly for their expertise, their education, their commitment, and compared to their peer groups. I don't think any of us expect anything different from our employers. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pakzad?
Yeah, I have no conflicts. I am here on the board on behalf of the community. I believe that the school board is there to represent the community. That's the role of the board. When we sit across the table for negotiation, obviously it doesn't have to be, and in my experience in the past few years, it hasn't been an adversarial situation. In the past, as Mrs. Demko mentioned, that hasn't been always the case. So as you know, we've had very contentious contract negotiations on times in the past 2 decades. One of the achievements of the past 4 years that I am very proud of is the fact that we managed to sit down with the teachers after a long time of these type of negotiations not having happened, and reach an early bird contract that was agreeable to the teachers and was agreeable to the board and the community. It was something that was in line with our pocketbooks, and it was something that the community could afford. It was something that did not result in us having to go back to those senior citizens and asking for more money. And I think that's important. We can't be here on this side of the table and then have concerns that are really sort of like not the concerns of the side of the table. And this doesn't mean that, you know, the moment that we leave the table, we cannot shake hands, but we cannot be, you know, friends or very open and happy with each other. But that doesn't mean that I have to leave the interest of this community, park it at the door, go there and say whatever you want. And I think that's the important role that a school board negotiation team has, and I think we managed to do that. We managed to do that without creating any acrimonious relationship. The association was very happy with the results. The community was very happy with the results. And I think that's the important part of this process that people need to understand, that these two are not in conflict. We can have respectful, friendly negotiations, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that one side has to surrender and give up things that they don't need to give up. I just say one more thing. This is one bad contract could have consequences that would come back and bite us for decades, because you can give up things in one contract that then you'll have to chase to fix them for many, many years.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. Mr. Dettmar?
Thanks. I have not had any conflicts of interest or appearances of conflicts of interest as far as I know in the last 4 years. I don't expect that to happen, but if it does, I certainly would recuse myself. As far as contracts go, as I mentioned earlier, I was a part of the negotiating team in the last round, and I felt that the process went very well. I believe that we showed respect for their position and they showed respect for our position, and I hope that that would continue. I don't have any reason to expect that it wouldn't. I do recognize that, especially from some of the teachers that I've talked to as we've been walking from door to door, that there is a lot of stress there. I don't believe that the things that I've heard are the kinds of things that can be fixed in a contract, though. Our superintendent has recently resigned, as many of you know, and we will be searching for a new one, and I'm hopeful that the new administration that he'll compose will be more sensitive to those kinds of things, and hopefully the stress level can be improved. I honestly hope that will happen. I think that that'll be an important part of the choice that we make for our new superintendent. That's really, I think, all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dettmar. We're going to close now with closing statements. We're going to ask that each of the candidates keeps to 90 seconds. And we started the night with Mr. Conte, so we'll end the night on this end of the table with Mr. Phillips.
So my belief is one of the most fundamental roles that we have as parents is educating our children. American society agrees. First statewide public education law was passed in 1852 in Massachusetts. Others followed through to Mississippi in 1917. This was 18 years before the need for an assured retirement income was established with Social Security in 1935, 48 years before Medicare and Medicaid were established in 1965. Education is established as essential to life. And essential: food, clothing, shelter, sanitation, healthcare, education. As we become an ever more technical society and more work shifts from doing to creating, the necessity for a strong educational foundation only increases. Schools are a major contributor in defining a community. It's almost impossible to talk about quality and livability of a community without talking about schools. Perhaps that's even more true in smaller, mostly residential communities like Hellertown and Lower Saucon Township. I look forward to rolling up my sleeves and working with this community every day to make sure our schools and community are moving forward. We have a strong foundation. I'd like to help make it great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Dr. Pakzad?
Well, thank you very much for this forum, Professor Chen. I am really running to continue with the progress that we've had over the past 4 years. I want to make sure that the things that we've achieved, we will continue to see them in the next 4 years. My interests are kids first. Anytime if there is a conflict between the interests of the kids and any other group, any other person, any other party or special interest, I'm always coming down on the side of the kids. If that requires us to ask for accountability, I'm for that. If that requires us to spend money, spend resources, I'm for that. I want to be fiscally responsible. We have ran this district at the budget level, at the district level, in a very fiscally responsible way. We've been respectful of the money of our taxpayers, and I think that's something that the school board has to have in mind. I'm well qualified for this, I must say, volunteer job, and I thank everyone who is here who is putting their hat in the ring to do that. This is a unpaid job, as you all know, and there is a lot of work that you have to do, and there is a lot of money that all of us have had to spend out of pocket to be here, to be in front of you, and to ask for your vote and support. I have been an educator for the past 30 years. I've been an educational leader. I have training in educational leadership. I am an engineer. These are all traits that make me a good school board member. I've tried to spend as much time as I can, and that's at the cost of me spending time with my kids and my family, but that has been done on behalf of you, on behalf of this community. And with that, I ask for your support, ask for your vote.
Thank you, Dr. Pakzad. Mr. Dettmar?
Thank you. I also am standing on my record for the last 4 years. I've hired a lot of people over my career, and one of the things that I've learned to look for is that fire inside, the drive to excellence to really make a difference. And since I'm asking you to rehire me for the next 4 years, I'd just like to say a few things about my fire inside. I have volunteered a lot here in our community. I've been the coach of the math club in the middle school. I'm assistant coach of the robotics club in the high school. I've been volunteering on the foundation for the last 10 or 11 years. I've raised over $100,000 in corporate donations for our school district through the foundation. I feel like I have shown that I'm willing to plow through the stacks of paper that we have to read before our meetings and really understand what they're talking about. I'm motivated to do a good job there. It's not easy to do that week after week, month after month for 4 years. So make sure you choose somebody who does have some fire inside. I'm also standing on my experience, my long years of business experience, the ability to choose good employees, the ability to reach good agreements with people, and to make good decisions. And I ask for your vote on November 2nd. Cedric Dettmar, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dettmar. Ms. Demko?
Thank you again, Dr. Chen, for holding this forum, and thank you, those who are attending, for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I know my reputation as a person, community member, or teacher are well known to most. If you don't know me, talk to your neighbors, friends, or contact me for additional information. I will endlessly serve this school community with integrity, honesty, and compassion. I do, again, appreciate you coming out this evening. I have been highly involved in our community. Somebody said to me, Viv, it's time for you to voice some things that you never say. And I'll say these things, and they're not easy for me to say. I'd rather keep them private. But I have supported this community in endless ways. I talked a little bit about the collection of the school supplies. Just a month ago, I was joined by several community members as part of our Buy Nothing group, that Facebook page that we run, and we scrubbed a community member's home so that he could return to our community. I don't say these things easily. This isn't something that I put out there very often. We do it very privately and very confidentially. I have supported people financially. I've worked with my family members to get people homes to live in our community. I will serve the school community with the same integrity and the same strong desire. Again, thank you for coming out this evening. I appreciate your time. And finally, I simply encourage you to be a voter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Demko. Mr. Conte?
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I just want to say that position on the school board is all about students' education. Everything that the board does has to be geared toward and center around the fact that an optimal education with limited resources is the goal. I think that the educational system that is provided by Saucon Valley is excellent. My daughter was educated here. She graduated as salutatorian. So I was very happy with the education that she received. My interest is in promoting that and continuing that excellence here in the school district. I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets before over numerous years. And I've managed many people over my lifetime in the insurance industry. I also believe that in order to have an excellent school system, you have to hire excellent people, pay them what they're worth, and give them the tools that they need in order to excel. And as member of the school board, that is my charge. So I thank you for your attention, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Conte. And candidates, I want to thank all of you for being with us this evening. I want to thank you for running. It is a difficult task, and we thank you for joining us and sharing your insights. And now, audience, would you join me in thanking our candidates? I also want to thank all of you for hanging with us. I know we're a little bit over time. It has been a privilege for me to be here tonight. Thank you for the questions that you submitted. If we didn't get to your question, I do sincerely apologize, but thank you for the excellent questions that you have submitted. The question now turns to you. Election day is coming up in November. Please make sure you are registered to vote. Whether you're voting by mail or in person, please be sure to get to those polls and vote. Again, thank you for joining us this evening, and we wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you.